Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Good afternoon. I'm Karen McMullen. I'm the features programmer at Doc NYC, and we're here today with the directors and a subject matter from the film you just saw, Chasing Childhood. We're here with Eden Wurmfeld, director, Margaret Munzer Loeb, director and executive producer, and film subject Genevieve Eason. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
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 Jen, Eden, you had a few words you wanted to say?
Well, I just quickly want to thank Doc NYC for inviting us. Thank you, Karen, Basil Tsiokos, and Tom Powers for inviting the movie. And just very quickly from the team, because if we were in person and we were in a theater, we'd invite all these people up on stage. So alphabetically, I'm going to do it. Mark Becker, Veronique Bernard, Lisa Eisenpresser, Kiana Jackson, Martine Philin Roberts, Justin Shine, Marianne Toman, and Anita Yu. We could not have made this film without you. Thank you so much. I wish we were all together to celebrate this moment.
Don't we all, Eden? Don't we all?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for showing your film. I saw the film early on in our process, and it's one of my favorites of the festival. It really spoke to me, and you know, I have a child who's 23, and it's very interesting how she grew up versus how I grew up versus how our parents grew up, and we're all in the same boat there, right? And you touched on a lot of very important and relevant topics right now, and one of them that struck me is kind of this endless pursuit of perfection that parents are enforcing on their kids right now. But it's not just that, it's kind of a larger theme that's going throughout our whole society. We as adults are all, you know, trying to have the best career and body and spouse and house and all that. Can you talk about, you know, this thing that's in the air, and whether you think it's just a passing moment? Do you think we'll right ourselves to have more reasonable standards sometime soon?
Margaret, do you want to jump in on that?
I feel like, and I'll just say, my training is in social work, but I really feel like Genevieve is going to have the most to say on this topic from her personal perspective. This is something that you landed really well in the film. I will say, as a parent, I have a child, like I have children who I have seen this in, and I've been really cautiously concerned. I've been very concerned about it, and I will, I think it's an unsustainable goal, but I think Genevieve really, if is comfortable, would be great to hear her speak to it from a more human perspective of how this happened in her own home.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think you're right. Perfectionism is something that we struggle with not only for our children. We live in a culture that expects perfection in some ways from our kids, and we expect perfection from ourselves as parents, and like you said, and in other aspects of our lives too. But I hope that adults are starting to grapple with the ways in which that can be harmful to ourselves and our families. I think I'm seeing more about that issue for adults and how we think about our own lives. And you know, you mentioned that you have a child in their 20s, and I have, you know, young adult kids now too. And I think one thing that I hope, I think you and I probably realized as our kids got older, and I hope parents with younger kids will see too, is that that push to encourage our children to try to be perfect in all ways, it's all for naught in the end, right? By the time they're the ages of your child or my children, they've come into their own, and they're figuring out who they are for themselves. And I think if we can step back from that perfectionism and trust them to find themselves, and then we'll see that as they get older, they will excel in the areas that are meaningful to them, and they'll be less than perfect in the things that are less important to them. And that's okay, because none of us are perfect at everything.
Facts, right? As the kids say, facts, right? So, Margaret, you said you're a philanthropist, you worked in social social issues, criminal justice reform, reproductive rights. What brought you to documentary filmmaking?
Oh God. I mean, honestly, I wanted to be in documentary filmmaking upon graduating from college, and was my very first job out of college was working on a film for a wonderful woman named Linda Schaefer. I worked on a TNT documentary called American Dreamers. And I just, you know, that world was very different at the time. We shot that on film. And it just felt like I needed to figure out how to go out and earn a living. And it was, and I ended up in film production and living with Eden out in Los Angeles. But I took a bunch of classes at NYU. So this was like, you know, nice to be able to come back to this, not so much because I was an experienced filmmaker, but because I was bringing the issues I'd been seeing in my own home to, and the lives around me, and my experience kind of in social activism and social work. All of those things felt like what culminated in making this film. But I would say, you know, the dream was always to be able to make a documentary film. I just had to take the route, the circuitous route of life. And I think that's part of the point. I would just say, coming back to the perfectionism, you know, Genevieve has this amazing line about always aiming for something. And like, how you land somewhere is not always a straight line. And we didn't take that, most of us, in our lives. And I think that that's one of the things that really inspired me and Eden, along with some other things, when we saw this happening in the lives of children and children we knew, that something felt amiss in this path kids were on about how they thought they were going to arrive at adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's this expectation that children are supposed to know what they want to do when they're, you know, 14 and follow a straight line. And it doesn't work that way. We went to the same college, Margaret. We went to a great school. We're both Brownies. But when I was there, one of the beauties of the school is they let you kind of meander and take things pass fail. And there wasn't this push for pre-professionalism, which I appreciated. Eden, how did you took a little bit of you worked in narrative films. You worked on Kissing Jessica Stein and Swingers, and here you are in documentary film. What brought you to this?
I mean, you know, I've always been just really committed to good storytelling, and I've also wanted to tell stories that have some social issue at the core of them. And whether that's a fiction film or a nonfiction film, that's really been where my heart is. And I think Margaret and I, as friends, were kind of, this all started with our conversations around our own upbringing and how we were raising our kids and how our kids, the culture in which our kids were growing up. And it grew very organically from that question into more serious research, and realizing that it wasn't just anecdotal, and it wasn't just us, and it wasn't just in New York City, and it wasn't just in upper middle class neighborhoods. It was transcending zip codes, and it was transcending geographics. And so that's how we found ourselves in these 3 locations, and exploring these questions that are explored in the film. And so we have Wilton, Connecticut on the one hand, which is a Tony community. And perhaps these issues are on steroids in more affluent communities, but in the Patchogue Medford district, we also found that these issues are very front and center, and that where there are different economics, that people are really putting themselves on the line and going into debt and so on and so forth to compete. And so while we always knew that the film spans a certain demographics, you know, something that often comes up is, how does this impact really poor kids in rural communities or urban communities? And I feel like that's really actually not the jurisdiction of this film. But that we did see a pretty wide spread from working class on up where this was playing out, where the issues that the film deals with were playing out. Margaret, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
I mean, I think that the other thing that's really important about the film and what we wanted to do, and sort of even going back to why we made the film, is we wanted to be an agent of change and for larger culture, not just about the competition and success piece of it, because, you know, not all of that is bad, but also just about the delay that we were seeing kids have in building the skills they needed to navigate adulthood. And that really kind of transcended neighborhood and zip code, and, you know, something that Julie Lythcott-Haims is in the film had really explored, that it was really everywhere. Like, when do you get to cook dinner? When do you get to climb a tree? When do you get to ride a bike? And so that's sort of how we landed in with some of the people in the film, like Lenore Skenazy and Julie Lythcott-Haims, who are, and Peter Gray. And that one of the ways that you get there is not just, is both in the chores and building responsibility, but is also in just having the time to go out and play. And we really wanted our film to not be another, you know, there's a film a lot of people have seen called Race to Nowhere, and we definitely did not want to make that film. We felt like the solution was to kind of roll back some of what had happened, some of our ideas around safety and what's valuable time. And I guess that's what I would add, is like, and I do think that actually, it is actually everywhere. And I've even heard these stories now in neighborhoods across the city, in New York City, and in neighborhoods around the country, where kids are finally out because they have time. They're back on, again, streets enough to be safe, but a lot of communities have streets enough where, you know, people are back outside watching kids and they're playing, and that that's a real value to that. We all grew up with that, but I think our kids didn't.
Mm-hmm. So Genevieve, you are a very brave and introspective woman. You were thrust into this role of being an activist, really, and you know, a community educator on this topic, based on what you saw happening with your own daughter. And I really commend you for that. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, what it takes for a parent to be that self-aware and self-critical to realize halfway through this journey of pushing your child to the top, to take a step back and say, hey, maybe this isn't the way?
Sure. Thank you so much those are very kind words, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to share our story because I hope that it will help other families. And I think that we're not at all unique. I think a lot of people have gone through things that are similar to what we've gone through at our house. So I think for me, we had a wake-up call, right? In that Savannah was really struggling, and she asked for help. And I had enough experience just previously in life to know that we needed to take that seriously, that there was something very wrong, and we couldn't, this wasn't going to be something where we, you know, got Savannah into therapy for a couple of weeks and then, you know, 6 weeks later, everything is better, and we just keep doing everything the way we've been doing it. So I think I may have been lucky in that we had a really sort of in our face moment that required a change. But I think that there are a lot of parents who have a gut feeling that something is not quite right. They have a gut feeling that their family life maybe isn't quite the way they expected it to be, or their kids, like they've noticed that their kids are living a very different childhood than they had, and they're concerned about it. So just in talking to parents, I think that there are a lot of people who have that feeling that something's a little off, and I think that a lot of people are eager to make a change. They're just not certain how. We always say at our house that, you know, high school feels like this fast-moving train. School in general feels like a fast-moving train. Like your kids get on in kindergarten and they better not get off. They can't get off. There's these trains only make brief stops, like during the summer, but the rest of the time the train is moving and you need to be on it. And getting off is very scary, and saying, we're going to do this differently, and we're going to slow things down. Maybe that train's too fast for us. It's very scary. So I think parents just need a sense that they're not the only one in their community. They need something to rally around. I hope this film will be that for a lot of parents, where they can find other like-minded parents and say, yeah, you know, I feel the same way you do, and they can support each other. I think having a network of like-minded parents is important when we're trying to make a change, or when we sense that we're heading in the wrong direction. So I hope this film will be a rallying point for parents who are looking for that.
Great. And how is Savannah doing?
Savannah's actually doing very well. Thank you for asking. Yes, she graduated in the spring from the Culinary Institute and moved to New Orleans and is starting a new job there.
Nice. And the other children in the film, Zach and Jack and Claire?
They're all just starting high school. So, you know, this is a very odd moment to be starting high school, but they're all New York City high schoolers as of this fall.
Mm-hmm. And were their parents able to continue with the loosening of the apron strings, giving the kids more freedom?
I think they largely have, and now that the kids are freshmen in high school, I mean, as for New York City is very particular in this way, because I think kids have to, at a certain point, start taking the train and going to school by themselves, and so on and so forth. So I think that everybody in that community that had the good fortune of having Lenore Skenazy come and work with them, both with the parents and with the kids, really benefited in this kind of deep way. And it's interesting to see how that has played out.
Well, I wish them luck. I wish everybody luck in this new COVID time. I bet everybody wishes we all had a little more freedom. But thank you so much for sharing your wonderful film, Chasing Childhood with Doc NYC. We're going to wrap up our Q&A now. And best of luck with the film. I hope it gets seen widely. It's a very important topic.
Thank you so much.